are children with disabilities more likely to be bullied?
Well, the short answer is yes. But the longer answer is uh things things matter. The disability itself, the characteristics of the disability, the services that they're provided, where those services are provided, what the deficit areas are, all of those things matter. We do know that kids that have social and communication skill deficits or difficulties, they tend to be victimized more than youth that can navigate their social surroundings more age appropriately. So that's for me, the two biggest predictors are looking at social and communication skills.
Sometimes they're also the bully.
This is a tough question. So the reason why it's tough is because our data, when you survey kids, the data suggests that yes, kids with disabilities tend to engage in higher rates of bullying than kids without. But again, there are some caveats to that. So if we think about kids that have behavior disorders, for example, they tend to engage in aberrant behavior under normal circumstances more than other youth. Well, some of those behaviors may look like bullying to others, but these kids are using some aggressive behaviors often as a form of communication. They don't know how to communicate their thoughts, wants, needs, and desires, so they engage in behavior that can be interpreted as bullying. The reason why I want to make that distinction is because that tells me that services need to be provided in schools to help these kids communicate in a socially appropriate way. The other caveat to that is looking at reciprocity, meaning that kids in self-contained environments, they tend to experience victimization and bullying, but all of these kids within that environment have an IEP. So yes, bullying happens in those environments, but it's happening to, from, and by other youth with disabilities. And so what that tells me is that we need better supports in place in our self-contained settings that allow the teacher to teach the content and life skills necessary, but also teach these behaviors, the socially appropriate behaviors around social and communication skills and interacting with one another. There is some level of protective factor in classrooms we're seeing for some kids with more significant disabilities, where kids without disabilities see the difference and recognize that bullying among youth that look different in terms of disability, they tend not to engage in victimization the same way they would if a kid had what we would say an invisible disability.
So when it's sort of clear that the child has a disability, the other children tend not to pick on them. And then also there are upstanders in a in an inclusive classroom, right?
That's accurate. Yeah. I mean, so the visibility of the disability, also these youth that serve as bystanders or upstanders, they often intervene. They're more likely to intervene in those situations. You see, because a lot of kids engage in bullying as a way to climb the social ladder. Bullying is a social construct, and so engaging in bullying against a student who is obviously more vulnerable, it tends not to be socially appropriate. It tends not to be accepted socially among their same age peers.
What do you think schools should be doing, particularly for children with disabilities, to stop bullying?
I believe that all schools should have a bullying prevention task force, a task force that examines bullying reports, that examines the interventions that are implemented, and they're also in charge of doing school-wide climate assessments. All schools should be doing a school climate assessment to get the pulse of the school, meaning that giving students voice to what bullying is, and asking students how often it's happening and where it's happening, and kind of under what circumstances and context. The other thing that I would recommend all schools doing is a behavioral risk screener. And what this does is it identifies youth that may be at risk of being involved in bullying. Maybe they're not heavily entrenched, but they're at risk. That way we can offer services before it becomes a problem. Now, from an intervention standpoint, I believe in what we call multi-tiered systems of support. This means that we're providing supports for all students based on their individual needs. So I believe all schools should have a bullying prevention approach that's school-wide. And I think that bullying prevention approach should be grounded in social emotional learning, where we're teaching kids things like self-awareness and social awareness and responsible decision-making. Then I believe that that schools should employ targeted interventions based on that behavioral risk screener. And these targeted interventions should focus on social and communication skill acquisition. For example, having a conversation and understanding how that conversation looks different in different contexts. And then the other thing that I believe that schools should be doing is they should be doing functional behavior assessments and behavior intervention plans for youth that either experience high rates of victimization or that engage in high rates of challenging behavior or bullying behaviors, to provide them with individual supports. That's the framework. Now, but that framework is complicated and it takes time to implement. One thing that I think all schools can implement today is, I believe that all schools could implement embedding social and communication skills into their daily curriculum. Meaning that if I'm teaching a math lesson and I have 3 objectives in that math lesson, I can add a 4th objective that is related to social or communication skills.
Then outside of school, what kind of things can the community do, and parents maybe through PTA or things like that?
One thing that I'd recommend is having schools and PTAs host like community forum, where like we've done community forum in several different districts, where they would invite the school nurse and a community member that employs youth with disabilities, and all these different organizations and people that make up that community, to talk about what they think bullying is, how they address bullying within their given construct, and what they could do as a community together. Because the biggest thing to bring communities together is to have common language.
Very often I've seen in that kind of community forum, it all ends up being talking about cell phones. And in some ways, cell phones help the kids to tell about what's happening to them.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been used to film things, but most people seem to think that they're making the problem worse.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's particularly so for students with disabilities?
When we think about technology, we have to figure out a way that we can coexist with technology and make sure our policies and practices are consistent enough. And if we say no cell phones in class, but you can have cell phones in the hallway, we need to make sure that all teachers are implementing it consistently.
Is exclusion, social exclusion, a type of bullying?
There's research out there to suggest that being socially excluded is just as bad for short and long-term outcomes as experiencing physical or verbal bullying. I think everybody can imagine, what it would be like if every day you go to school and you feel like you're alone among a sea of your peers. That's not good for your mental health at all. And so social exclusion is one of those things that I've really been talking to school districts about working on, because it's a lot of times adults want kids to navigate things independently or solve problems independently, use their problem solving skills. But there are some contexts, like being socially excluded daily, that need some assistance, that need some help. And it's, to me, that is the one area of bullying prevention that we could certainly do a better job with in schools, and even as a parent myself, like in parenting.
What can parents do individually if their child is being bullied?
So at home, the first thing that any parent would want to do is watch for any behavioral change. Behavior change should be a direct indication that something is wrong. And it doesn't necessarily mean bullying, just in general, working with all youth, including youth with disabilities. If you see a shift in behavior, then that's time to have a conversation. The other thing that I strongly recommend to parents is having conversations with your kids. And it's one of those things to where we get in this routine as parents, and we'll pick up our kid from school, or they'll come home, we'll say, how was your day? And they say, fine. And then, we go about our way. Well, I would encourage all parents to start asking direct questions. Like, for example, when I pick my daughter up, I'll ask her a question like, what made you laugh today? What did you learn today? What did you play at recess today? Who decided what you played at recess? Part of it is to open the line of communication to where if there is a problem, then the kid will come to the parent. The other piece of it is to learn who the child is interacting with. So what is their friend group? Who are these individuals? And is it consistent every day? If they do know bullying is happening, there's a couple of steps that parents can make. The first one is they need to talk to their kid first off about what makes them unique and valuable, because we want to make sure that their self-worth is built back up. That's key, right? To make sure that they understand their worth. The next piece is mapping out a plan of what to do, what to say. So, like, what do you do if you see or experience bullying? What do you say if you see or experience some bullying? And then the next piece is, who do you tell? So what do you do? What do you say? And who do you tell? And being just really consistent, practicing that. And then whoever this person they tell is needs to be aware. And it's likely going to be somebody in the school. So the parent should be communicating with the schools, which then leads into the next thing parents should do is always build that bridge between themselves and the schools. To me, parents send the best kid they have to schools, and the schools educate the kids to the best of their ability. And even though there's some disagreement, the general purpose of parenting and schooling is very similar, to provide the best possible outcome for this kid. We have to teach kids how to be better citizens, how to interact with one another. We have to focus on social and communication skills and talk to youth about embracing their individuality and celebrating others' differences. Because when we grow up to be adults, those differences and that individuality is what separates us and makes us the people that we are. And if we start celebrating those things at a younger age, then kids can start to cultivate and develop their identities more rapidly. And I think that would set them up for success, not only to be resilient against bullying, but not experience it.